just what I'm made of now. Trying to reach inside of me, trying to get my ambition. Let me show you just what I'm made of.
Yeah, you guys already know that it's a good day when I'm wearing Eagles gear, especially considering the fact that Philadelphia beat the Giants yesterday and have claimed the number 1 seed in the NFC and blocked Dallas from taking over the division. So, just a great day all around from a team that's been phenomenal pretty much all season. So, it's also because we are finally done talking about the trash today. Today we can finally talk about the positives. Not the best list, not quite yet, but something almost as good. The top 10 most surprising films of 2022. And there were a lot of them. Trust me. There were so many I couldn't even put all of them on this list. And I tried to go with the ones that aren't on the best list proper, so I could add a little bit more variety in here, but a good few of them still made it in. I'll explain as we go along. So, just like the disappointing list, there are no honorable mentions, so we can just get right into it. So this is my top 10 most surprising movies of 2022. Let's get started. Starting off the list at number 10 is a movie I should have expected nothing out of, but it ended up being a real fun ride, let me tell you. And that movie, kicking this list off at number 10, is Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons. Now, this is a film that I, again, expected nothing out of, especially after Warner Brothers Animation took 2 whole slots in my top 5 of my top 10 worst list last year, with the absolutely abysmally awful adaptation of the Injustice games, the animated adaptation of Injustice, and the horrible abomination sequel that was Mortal Kombat Legends Battle of the Realms. They were both in the top 5 worst lists last year. But here they are, and they come back with fire and fury, to say the least, because this was actually a very enjoyable movie. Yes, it does have a few flaws. Like, there are a few moments when you can tell that the animation is taking a few shortcuts here and there. Like, I can't count how many frames I caught just T-pose flat random Superman flying against a background like a green screen just scrolling behind him. Like that one, that is a funny little animation error. And also, it's very stylized, so I can see why it might get on some people's nerves, but me, it really worked, and the stylization actually really works here, and the 3D, for the most part, was very well done. The voice acting is superb from everyone, especially Jack Dylan Grazer, who a lot of you may or may not recognize from Stranger Things, who is the voice of John Kent, or in this case, Superboy. And he does a great job in this movie. Like, absolutely phenomenal job in this film. And not to mention, there's also a really nice, heartwarming family dynamic here with the Superman family, because you have Superman trying to balance being a good dad and being there for his kid, as well as a good husband for his wife Lois, and still being a superhero going around saving the world. You know, he has that. He's struggling with that balance, and not to mention, he's at the beginning of the movie at least keeping it a secret from his son that he is Superman, which is interesting to say the least. And then on the other side of that coin, you have Batman. And Batman, in this movie, is, well, trying to sway his Robin, Damian Wayne, in the right direction. Because this is Damian Wayne. This is the guy that was raised by Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows and was part assassin. And I know a lot of people hate this character, but in this movie, he works for what he is. And I think, what was his name? Jack Griffo, I believe was the name of his voice actor. He did a really good job in this movie. But the one thing I can say right off the bat that really surprised me with this movie enough to put it on this list and spoiler alert on the best list, is the fact that it is laugh out loud funny. Like, the dialogue doesn't feel like that cheap, low-hanging fruit humor you would expect from movies like this. No, it's all really smartly, sharply written that makes sense with the characters. And not to mention, Superboy and Robin have amazing chemistry throughout the whole movie. And then, of course, you have Starro, who turns out to be a very, very good villain in here. And then you also have a little cameo from Lex Luthor, a lot of little DC Easter eggs. And it's just a blast to watch. Like, seriously, I will elaborate more on this movie in the best list. But I'm telling you right now, it is definitely one of the most surprising movies of the year. So yeah, absolutely super film, worth watching. Great job, WB. Alright, next at number 9 is a bit of an odd one, because this one is a tie between two movies that came out the same year for the same franchise. And a franchise that no one was expecting to be as great as it was. And that movie, or movies I should say, are X and Pearl. Now, X has been getting a lot of praise lately. And after watching it, I can see where most of it's coming from. And it definitely did surprise me, that's why it's on this list. But, I don't know, it feels like it was just a little too overhyped by most critics, but it is still a very, very good movie. But what made this movie even better was Pearl. Pearl was the great film that I was waiting for. And not only did it work perfectly as a counterpart to X, it truly showed Mia Goth's amazing acting range and performance potential. She did an amazing job in this movie. And she did an amazing job in X as well, playing a double role. And see, in X also, it's funny. Like, it is a movie that has good humor, but is also able to balance some dark stuff. And it also tackles a lot of dark themes that most of these movies wouldn't have the balls to do. But here, it made sense, and this is how you make sympathetic villains. Hello, Disney! Disney, are you listening? This is how you make a villain sympathetic. And then Pearl just made it even better. So, yeah, this is a pretty short, sweet, to the point entry. Unfortunately, neither of them are making the best list, but I still wanted to talk about them because I was going to get comments up the you-know-what hole all about it if I didn't at least mention it. So yeah, number 9, X and Pearl, definitely one of the most surprising movies of the year. Number 8 is a movie that I thought I had expectations set high enough that I wouldn't be surprised, and yet it surprised me anyway, and that is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This movie is phenomenal. I want to say more, but I don't really know where to start because I don't want to... I'm saving my real big explanation praise for this movie for a certain other video. I think you guys know which one if you know me well enough, and no spoiling it in my comment section. But Sonic 2 was a movie that I had expectations set way up here. Like, it was skyrocket high. The trailer, all the news that was coming out, Colleen O'Shaughnessy getting her first big role playing Tails in a big theatrical movie. That was a big deal. And then somehow the movie still found a way to get all the way up here, when my expectations were already here. Think about that. And I know it's a movie that no one else is going to have on these kind of lists, because it just seems like another movie that came and went, even though it is still a huge movie. And those post-credit scenes, the post-credit scene, and especially the final battle, are just mind-blowing. And not to mention, this movie was just a blast all throughout. It didn't drag, it was constantly funny, and it took everything that made that first Sonic movie so good, throughout the little stuff that did make it a bit flawed, and pretty much perfected it. Which now, I am sky-high hyped for Sonic 3. And like I said in the other video, on my worst list, if Avatar 3 is the reason that Sonic 3 bombed at the box office, I will throw a fit. Just saying. But yeah, it surprised me, even when I had my expectations set sky high. So yeah, Sonic 2, number 8 on the most surprising list. How about that, huh? Number 7, shout out to my friend Mitchell Kirkbride. This is the movie that he was probably expecting me to put on the best list, but unfortunately it's not going to because there was just so much stiff competition this year. But this is still a really good movie I want to talk about, and it's another example that WB Animation is back on the right track after last year dropping 2 back-to-back failures. And that movie is Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. This is a movie that I didn't know what to expect. It was the first movie of this brand new Guess Who era of the Scooby-Doo franchise. And for those of you that don't know what I mean by that, allow me to go on a little bit of a rant. Well, rant / explanation, tangent, whatever you want to call it. The way that most of us Scooby-Doo fans like to categorize all the different movies and eras of Scooby-Doo is by the animation. And most of the time the animation coincides with a TV show that's either running at the time or is the most recent. For example, let me give a few examples. For example, let's take Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, for example. That's a movie that had the animation and this distinct kind of characterization of the Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show, and thus it's part of the Scooby-Scrappy-Doo era, or as I just call it, the pre-Mook era. And then you have stuff like Zombie Island through Cyber Chase, which are movies made by Mook Animation that have a higher budget, that have higher stakes, something like that. And then you have the What's New era, which is, of course, because it's the animation is from What's New Scooby-Doo, which was the show that was on at that time in the 2000s. And you had a pretty mixed bag there, because you had great stuff like Samurai Sword, for example, but then you also had terrible crap like Monster of Mexico. So, yeah. And then, of course, most recently, there was the Mystery Incorporated era, which I think is the longest era of this franchise, because from Abracadabra-Doo all the way to last year's Scooby-Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog, it was the Mystery Incorporated animation style and general feel, even though there was a bit of stylization in between. For example, Scooby-Doo meets Batman the Brave and the Bold, which is in the Mystery Incorporated style, but it also has a bit of that extra stylization that makes it fall in line with Batman the Brave and the Bold. It's a whole complicated thing. And most recently, there was Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, which is a HBO Max exclusive show that's pretty much a modern-day version of the new Scooby-Doo movies from back in the day. So, after Scooby-Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog came out, and it was officially announced that this new movie, the next movie in the Scooby-Doo series, is going to be part of the new Guess Who era, and that the Mystery Incorporated era was finally being put to rest, I went in a bit hesitant. And then also there was the news about this having LGBTQ representation, where, in my opinion, it doesn't even belong. Some new characters that no one knew about, and the trailer being very confusing, to say the least. So I walked into this with my expectations kind of in the middle. And I'm going to say this right now, for a new start to a brand new era of this Scooby-Doo franchise, Trick or Treat is actually pretty good. It's not, I can't say it's great, it has a lot of problems, but it is a really good first start. Now, okay, why do I not think it's great? Well, pretty simple explanation, actually. The animation, well, it's definitely, again, the Guess Who animation. There are a few times it does feel like it's cutting corners, but it's not as blatantly obnoxious as it was in Battle of the Super Sons with T-Pose and Superman, but it is still a bit blatant, and it is still noticeable, just not distracting. I do think that this is one franchise that did not need LGBTQ representation, because that just seemed extremely forced to me, especially considering the fact that in Mystery Incorporated, we had Fred and Daphne, and then Velma and Shaggy. Those were the two somewhat couples and ships throughout the Scooby-Doo series in that era of the franchise. So saying that Velma is now in this community definitely feels like it's out of nowhere, and it definitely does feel a bit cash grabby and trying to stay with trends of the time, so to speak. And I do think that they underplay the villain a little bit. Coco Diablo is an awesome new character. She's sassy, she's unique, she's distinct from everyone else in the Scooby Gang, and she feels very, very unique. Like, she could become a series mainstay, kind of like the Hex Girls did with Witch's Ghost. But her problem is that they forced her into this low effort, badly written, horribly executed love story that really restricts her character on what she can and can't do. And that's the kind of thing that can piss me off. And it did take me off in this movie because Coco and Velma have no chemistry on screen. That being said, though, like I said, this is still a really good movie. I know, I'm sorry, I crapped on it for a little bit there, but it is still a really good movie. I do think the Guess Who animation is that perfect blend of nostalgia and modern, while not trying to be too over-dramatic, I will say. I do think its concept is really cool, having these ghost zombie versions of the Mystery Inc. gang be the villains is a really cool concept, and the designs they got away with were pretty gruesome. It still has funny moments. You still have the Mystery Incorporated voice cast, because you still have Matthew Lillard as Shaggy, you still have Greta Lee Griffin as Daphne, and unfortunately, you still have Kate Micucci as Velma. I'm sorry, I will never buy her as Velma. Yes, there are some times where she's not as annoying and upfront, but for some reason, just Kate Micucci does not have that tone, that perfect execution of someone like, say, Mindy Cohn, for example, who did a great job balancing Velma between her nerdy scientific side and her more enjoyable, unique side, where she doesn't always try to be realistic. I'm sorry, Kate Micucci's just a bad Velma. I'm sorry. She's just, no. I don't buy her as Velma. I never have bought her as Velma ever since she was casted, and it still doesn't work here. Not as bad as Return to Zombie Island, but still not very good. But the story itself is still really good. It's very unique, and it has a reason to exist. I'll put it that way. I just wish it was just a little bit better. And if they didn't have that forced romance to try and cash in on a trend, it would definitely probably be an 8 or a 7.5. But as it is a 7. It's still a really good movie, and definitely one of the most surprising of the year, but it could have been just a little bit better. That being said, still a great movie. Still a really good movie. Definitely recommended for Scooby-Doo fans. So yep, that is my super long-winded, completely unnecessarily deep, in-depth thoughts on Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. Let's move on now. Moving on to number 6 on the list, let's go from the kids' horror to the from the boys' horror to the man's horror. Scream 5 came out of nowhere and did so many things right. If you told me that for the 5th installment of this franchise, they would make probably the best sequel of the series since Scream 2, and not only that, it would break the horrible January horror movie curse, I would have laughed in your face, because, I mean, a 5th installment in a long-running franchise like this usually doesn't end very well. Nightmare 5. But somehow, someway, they pulled it off. And this is another one that I'm gonna wait for the best list to really elaborate on, but all you need to know right now is that it broke the January horror movie curse, and it did an amazing job as a 5th installment in a franchise. It's funny, it's dark, it's twisted, it is brutal, and sure, the mystery is extremely predictable, which is the big thing holding it back, but pretty much everything else about it works to a staggering degree. And it has my hopes pretty high for Scream 6 whenever it comes out. I believe it got pushed to March, even though it was supposed to originally come out in February. But, you know what, who knows. Whenever it comes out, I'll review it, and I'm going to be excited to watch it. So, yep, that is number 6, Scream 5. Number 5, speaking of surprising horror movies, who would have expected The Menu to be probably one of the best horror films of the year? Like, who at all expected this? Like, you have a movie about a chef, this really dedicated chef, and this whole team of chefs that he runs has a bunch of these high-end people of different ideologies and different paths of life in this one room, and he's going to be giving them what he calls the menu. But how would you expect it to be such a hilarious, tense, dark, effective, just delightful little horror film? Like, who would have expected it? Ralph Fiennes deserves some Oscar nominations for his performance in the movie as the head chef. Like, wow, he was good in this movie. And Dakota Johnson was a excellent leading protagonist and a great supportive character. And then all the other characters are really good in here too, like John Leguizamo. I have been waiting for years for this guy to make a comeback, and he's finally in another good movie. Like, seriously, his role in this movie may seem a bit undercut, but when you really look at it, it's downright genius. It's very clever and very well done. And speaking of clever, the writing throughout this is sharp as a knife. It is so well done and so well executed. And the twist and the big final act is going to leave your jaw on the floor. Yeah, that's all I can really say about it without spoilers. So, yeah, The Menu, definitely one of the biggest surprises of the year. Number 4, let's get another horror film in here, because horror had a great year, let me tell you. And let's get another horror film in here. And this is a movie that I bet you no one else has talked about, that no one else has really reviewed, and no one else is really giving any attention to. And that is a little horror film called Piggy. Now, for those of you that don't know what this is basically a bullying victim revenge thriller. Kind of. It's a little hard to explain because it jumps between many different genres throughout its runtime. And this is another one that unfortunately does not make the best list, but it is still a very good horror film, and it really surprised me because I had no expectations for this going in. I'm like, okay, all I know is the title, I've seen the poster, have not seen a trailer, I don't know what to expect. I'm going in fully, completely blind, and I don't know what's going to happen. And what happens? It becomes one of the most thrilling, tense, dark, just all-around kick-ass horror films I've seen all year. And why does it work so well? Because of its lead actress. I apologize for forgetting your name, but you did an amazing job in this film portraying this character that has to portray so many different emotions. And the twists and turns this movie's going to take is really going to throw you for a loop. And not to mention, it has a really unique premise, it has a really unique style, and it is a foreign film, I will say that. And usually outside of anime, I don't usually touch foreign films because they're usually not my thing. But I really liked this one, despite the fact I had to watch it in subtitles. But it was really, really good and tense all the way through, and it's a movie that sadly no one's going to talk about. And that's a shame, because it is a really good horror film, and definitely one of my biggest surprises of the year. Yeah, sorry, I'm flying through these right now because I spent so much time on Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo that I'm trying to not take an hour. And we're already up to number 3, and we're not a half hour in, so you know what? I think I'm making decent time here. Number 3 is Puss in Boots 2. This is a movie that I had high expectation for when I first heard it announced. I'm like, yes, we're getting a new Puss in Boots. He's finally coming back. This is going to be the big comeback. Yeah, sorry for making a cut. I had to go fetch something, but yeah, I'm a person that really enjoys the first Puss in Boots. I saw it for the first time during my little DreamWorks binge-a-thon leading up to The Bad Guys, and I really enjoyed this one. And then only a few days later, I found the DVD in a Walmart bargain bin. Just amazing what you can find in there, isn't it? And while I don't think this is the best DreamWorks movie of the year, because I think all of you already know what my favorite DreamWorks movie of the year is, I still love Puss in Boots 2. Like, it did such an amazing job bringing back not only the Shrek franchise as a whole, but giving Puss a lot more character depth and a struggle that is very relatable to some people, especially people that are around my age. And also giving this franchise back that hard-edged adult humor and themes that made the first two Shrek movies such masterpieces. And this is no exception. This movie is a almost clear-cut masterpiece. Not to mention the villain. Oh, the villain, Fear, the wolf guy. He is so freaking scary and effective that he is already becoming one of my favorite villains in all of DreamWorks. Like, he's so good in this movie. And if that wasn't good enough, you also have Kitty Softpaws returning from the first one. She's even better in this one than she was in the first one. You have Pepe the dog, who's okay. He's an okay little comedic foil. He wasn't actively annoying, but I'm not really going to remember him in 3-4 years' time. But the big standout here that I want to talk about, that no one's talking about when they review this movie for whatever stupid reason, is Florence Pugh as Goldilocks. Like, her performance as Goldilocks in this movie is so good. Like, it is so good. She has to balance all these different emotions and different archetypes, and she does it with flawless ease. And whenever there's an emotional moment between her and these three bears, not to mention the way they actually incorporate this fairy tale into the Shrek universe, is downright clever. It is effective, and it works very well. It is a movie that is going to tug at your heartstrings. And like I said in, I believe it was my worst list video, go watch this movie instead of Avatar 2. It is a million times better. I can't really say anything more than that because you guys already know it's on my best list, so. Yep, Puss in Boots 2, easily one of the biggest surprises of the year. Number 2. Time for another horror film that no one's going to talk about except for me, and that's a shame because it's a freaking masterpiece, and that is The Retaliators. This is a film that has been through so much development hell, from having to get delayed because of COVID, and then delayed again because of a second wave of COVID, and then have to get out the soundtrack, and then there was some production issues going on, and it just seemed like everything was working against this movie until they finally said, you know what, we're going to be releasing it on November 8th, and you'll finally get to see it. And I finally did get to see it, and it is probably one of my new favorite horror films of all time. Michael Lombardi, I need to shout this man out because he steals this movie with a career-defining performance that is so good. Like, seriously, I know that the Oscars make a lot of mistakes, but this guy needs an Oscar nomination now. He did such an amazing, phenomenal job in this movie, but only because it's a horror film, it's not going to get that, and it's a real shame because this is Oscar-worthy acting right here from Michael Lombardi. Great leading man. You also have over-the-top violent deaths and gore that are very reminiscent of Evil Dead. You have really good acting, surprisingly, from some of the secondary antagonists in the movie, like Papa Roach and Five Finger Death Punch. And in speaking of that, there's also a phenomenal soundtrack in here, made up of a bunch of different people. And then, of course, you have a few extra rock and metal cameos thrown in here, especially one Spencer Charnas of Ice Nine Kills that I met in person, and trust me, he's an awesome dude. Trust me, met him in person. He's such a cool guy. And while his role in this movie is very brief and very short, trust me when I say it is damn good and damn effective. Seriously, put more Spencer Charnas in horror films, please. And that's really all I can say without spoiling it or going too in depth and then making it have to be super brief when I go to the best list. Because, yeah, this is on the best list, spoiler alert. Because this movie's fantastic. And it is, in my opinion, the horror film of 2022. Yeah, I know, it's not Terrifier 2. Sorry. I'll elaborate why when I get to the best list, but yeah. Retaliators, phenomenal film. And hey, it's another Christmas horror film that also works as a Thanksgiving and, well, not Thanksgiving, sorry, as a Halloween and Christmas movie. First time since Nightmare Before Christmas I can actually say that. Just awesome, awesome film. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch Retaliators right now. It is a freaking masterpiece. Easily one of the biggest surprises of the year. But not the biggest. Number one. I've talked a lot about WB and WB animation on this list. And we're going to be talking about them again for the number one spot. Because there was another film that came out this year from WB Animation that I expected nothing out of. I literally waited until about a week ago to finally watch it. And my friend James Robotnik in particular was praising this movie highly. And I was sitting there like, okay, are you really sure about that, bro? Like, I mean, the second movie was such an abysmal train wreck. How was this any better? But then when I finally watched it, I completely understood what he meant. And it resulted in what's, in my opinion, the biggest surprise movie of 2022. A movie that no one is going to talk about. And that's a shame. Because this is a movie that deserves to be talked about. And that film is Mortal Kombat Legends Snowblind. After the god-awful Battle of the Realms, I was convinced that this Mortal Kombat Legends anthology that started so well with Scorpion's Revenge was completely dead in the water on the second try. They tried to go bigger, and as a result, they face-planted and completely missed what made Scorpion's Revenge such a great film. Here in Snowblind, they decide, instead of continuing that garbage storyline, they decided to make a spin-off of sorts about Kenshi, of all people. Yeah, Kenshi. Someone that is a Mortal Kombat mainstay, yes, but let's be honest, guys, he's like a B, C tier character. Then you have Kuai Liang, I think the name is, something like that, who plays this older grizzled scorpion. And speaking of that, you also have this movie set pretty much in some kind of weird future timeline, where Kano is the king, the Shadow Dragons rule the land, and Shang Tsung is pretty much Kano's yeah. And this is also an origin story for Kenshi, because he starts out as this cocky, arrogant, just unlikable character. And then he gets his just desserts, because then Tremor comes in and kicks the crap out of him. It's not a spoiler. He was in the trailer, and he's on the DVD box art. So Tremor comes in, gives him a beating, and then he ends up, going on another adventure with a certain other MK character. Not going to say who it's. I believe that's also a spoiler. And he loses his eyesight. And then he has to pretty much completely rethink his way of thinking, and then he has to train under this retired old grizzled version of Sub-Zero, who has this really, really, really dark, emotional backstory. Well, not emotional, tragic, sorry. The wrong word I'm looking for. I cannot talk today for shite. And I can't say anything more without spoilers, because everything else about this movie is so amazing that it's pretty much all a spoiler. And the kills are probably the best since Scorpion's Revenge. Like, they are... If you thought the Scorpion's Revenge deaths were brutal, oh, you ain't seen nothing yet, because Snowblind is vicious. Unrelentingly vicious. Like, it has so much blood and gore that I swear to you, it almost makes Scorpion's Revenge look like Care Bears in comparison. I shite you not. And then the finale is great, the action's great, the animation, while a bit different from the past two movies, it's a lot less angular and a bit more anime. I think that's the word I'm looking for, kind of like an anime, because it has that kind of soft tone and colors and stuff like that. And yeah, this movie is a thrill ride from beginning to end, and if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you are absolutely required to watch this movie. And for those reasons and a million more that I can't elaborate on, but I would rather not because they're all spoilers, Mortal Kombat Legends Snowblind is without a doubt the most surprising movie of 2022. And thank you, James Robotnik, for actually convincing me to watch it. That was a mouthful. Well, that was the top 10 most surprising movies of 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please don't forget to drop a like, leave a comment, share this video all over social media, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that algorithmic garbage to help the channel grow. And tomorrow, guys, tomorrow is the big one. It is a big one. It is a big one. Because now that we are through the biggest surprises, the most disappointing, and the outright worst, tomorrow is a huge video that may or may not be over an hour. Because tomorrow is the top 20 best movies of 2022. Yes, 20. That is not a typo. That is not a mistake. I'm doing a top 20 list for the best because there are so many amazing films that came out this year that it deserves it. So, yep, that's tomorrow's list. But until then, I'm going to go get a throat lozenge because I feel like my throat's trying to die on me as I'm trying to talk. So, thank you guys for watching. I'm Jack Small, your one and only animation station, and Cynical Saiyan 77. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.